Undercover boss orders, pancakes, freezes when waitress says she can't afford groceries. There are mornings that begin with a cup of coffee. There are mornings that begin with a hunch you can't ignore. The sun had just cast its first light on the roof tiles of Sunrise Diner, a suburban branch that lay quietly at the intersection of an old neighborhood and a peaceful row of homes. Michael Carter, 50 years old, CEO of the entire restaurant chain, stepped in, holding a small notebook, wearing a dark brown coat and a cap pulled low. He wasn't there to check the revenue, nor was he there to meet with the manager. He was there to listen to the things not found in the financial reports. Because in just 3 weeks, at this branch, there had been 2 resignation letters with no specific reason and 1 anonymous email from a former employee with a short warning: those who truly work don't get their fair share. And those who are chosen, all they have to do is stand in the right place to get their share. On paper, this branch was operating smoothly. But Michael knew that sometimes what's called smooth is actually a sign of a system that's stuck and unjust. He chose a table by the window, ordered a plate of pancakes and a black coffee, not because it was his favorite, but because it was the easiest way to stay long enough to observe. No one recognized him as the CEO. And that's what he needed to see, the unfiltered truth, not the welcome reserved for the boss. That morning, the diner wasn't too crowded, but the atmosphere was warm and unusually quiet, as if someone on the team was working their hardest just to survive under something no one wanted to name. Michael gently swirled his hot coffee in his hand. He didn't know what was waiting for him, but he was sure of one thing. If justice was buried here, then he had to be the one to dig it up. There are words spoken as if by accident, but they can be enough to make an entire system pause and reflect. No. Michael was lightly stirring his coffee when a young girl approached his table, thin, eyes a bit tired, but her voice still gentle and polite. "Good morning, sir. Today we have special buttered pancakes that go best with black coffee." Michael smiled and nodded. "One of those, please." While waiting for the food, they made small talk, the kind of small talk a kind-hearted server keeps up even when busy. Michael asked, his voice gentle, as if filling the space between 2 customers, "How's work going this morning? The place seems to have a steady stream of customers." Emily paused for a second, then smiled but didn't look him directly in the eyes. "Yes, it's okay. Just that, I haven't been able to go to the market in almost a week." Michael looked up. "Why's that?" Emily lightly gripped the tray. "Hourly pay is enough to cover rent, but tips, I hardly get any. The shifts I work, the system doesn't record my name because I'm not on the POS. And here, digital tips only go to those whose ID is on the machine." Her gentle tone, but it felt like someone had just poured cold water down Michael's back. He put his coffee cup down, looking at the pancake plate that had just been placed in front of him, but felt heavier than the melting butter on top. This was no longer about efficiency or KPIs. It wasn't some abstract reflection. It was a sign, clear and concrete, that someone was carrying an entire shift, yet wasn't counted as existing in the system. And if that was true, then the problem wasn't with the employee. It was with the system he himself had designed to protect people like her. Not everyone who gets left out is because they did something wrong. Sometimes they're just missing 1 line of code on a screen. Michael stayed another hour. And in that hour, he didn't just drink coffee. He took note of every move in the diner, as if rewatching a play he once thought he'd written himself. Emily hardly ever stopped moving, taking orders at table 4, clearing dirty trays at table 2, bringing iced lemon water to table 6, returning to table 3 to apologize for the late eggs. No one helped her. And what made Michael's brow furrow even more, every time a customer paid by card and left a tip, the receipt printed the name Brent L. 817, table 3, $3. Pimus tip, Brent. 8 is 0.7 tip, Brent. 02, table 1, 5 tip, Brent. Brent, the one standing behind the counter, hand on the POS, never once stepping out onto the floor. Emily, the one sweating between tables, yet her name wasn't in the system. At the end of the morning shift, as customers started to thin out, Michael followed Emily toward the break room. The small room, walls stained with the smell of food and cheap air freshener. She sat down, pulling out an old notebook from her backpack, the paper edges curled, some pages stained with ink. "I don't have an ID in the POS. Every time a customer tips, the system records the name of the operator." She handed him the notebook. Michael opened it. Each page was filled with small, neat notes. 742, table 2, tip $2. 815, Table 5, tip $3.25. 8:48, Table 1, tip $4. Ling, operator, Brent. On the last page, a line written in red ink, underlined, total loss, 385.50, 3 weeks. Emily didn't demand anything, didn't complain. She just said one sentence. So softly, it felt like she was afraid even she wouldn't believe it. I just keep track, to remind myself that I really did the work. Michael didn't respond right away, not because he had no words, but because he knew no words right now could erase the weariness etched into her eyes. In that moment, he understood. A system might be technically correct, but if it allows the one who truly worked to become invisible, then it needs to be rewritten. From the ground up. There are times when what exhausts a person isn't the lack of money, but the feeling of being erased from the very place they've helped keep alive. Michael flipped through each page of the notebook, not skipping a single line. He wasn't just reading numbers. He was reading every piece of evidence of an operating system he'd once proudly called transparent and fair. Emily gently untied her hair and then tied it back. A small motion, but it made Michael realize she'd done it all morning. Every time she was too tired, she'd tie her hair tighter as if cinching herself back together so she wouldn't let out a single word of complaint. How long are you going to keep writing like this? Michael asked, his voice as soft as if he were speaking to a family member. Emily didn't look up. She smoothed the curled edges of the notebook and replied, until the day I leave here, or until someone sees. Michael bit his lower lip. In that moment, he understood this wasn't just about one branch or one girl. This was the crack in a belief he'd once thought unshakable. Emily stood up, adjusted her apron, and prepared to leave the break room. You still have to go back out there? Michael asked. Yes, there are still 2 tables waiting. And if I don't go out, the customers will think this place doesn't care about them. The door closed behind her, and Michael, for the first time in years, sat alone in an employee room without anyone welcoming him to feel something he'd missed for too long. The feeling of being quietly turned away by the very system he'd built from the kind people who made it run. Justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up at the right time and be undeniable. 9:12 a.m. Monday. Sunrise Diner in the outskirts was packed. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the clinking of cutlery and the lively sound of orders being called out. Brent stood behind the POS machine, still his usual composed manner, white shirt neat, headset on like a professional dispatcher. The manager, Miss Lois, was signing off an order slip at the counter, paying no attention. The door opened. Michael Carter walked in. No more baseball cap, no brown jacket. Just a man with a determined look, holding a USB stick, heading straight to the payment counter. Give me a minute with the system, he said. No one understood what was happening. Until the POS screen went dark, then lit up again, this time not with the pancake menu. The first video, Emily carrying a tray to table 6, serving, smiling, bowing her head in thanks to the customer. A minute later, Brent approached the POS, scanned the bill. The screen showed 907, table 6, $4. Pivan tip Brent L. The next recording, Lois voice even cold. If you want to receive tips, you need an approved ID. No name, no share. Final part. Security camera in the break room. Emily, thin, exhausted, quietly wraps a slice of bread in a napkin and puts it in her backpack. No one says anything, but that image says it all. The restaurant falls silent. A few customers look up from their meals. A few staff glance at each other, eyes filled with confusion. Emily, about to bring water to table 4, freezes at the counter. Michael turns around. His voice is not loud, but as sharp as a needle hitting stone. I did not build Sunrise Diner for good people to have to sneak bread into their bag after a shift soaked in sweat. He looks directly at Lois, the manager. You've turned the approval system into a tool to exclude people from what they deserve. And then he turns to Brent. You use the system to collect for yourself, even the parts that didn't belong to you. A single nod. 2 sealed envelopes handed over by the HR representative. Lois Carmichael, immediate termination of contract, effective immediately. Brent Langley, all POS access revoked. Michael didn't need to say more. He plugged a small device into the POS system. The screen lit up with a new message. Tip system, reset verified, name-based, live tracking. He turned back and announced to all staff and customers in the restaurant, from today, every tip will be recorded under the actual server's ID, displayed publicly, updated in real time. No more approval lists. No more hidden names. He looked at Emily, who was still standing silently, water tray in hand. And no one will have to live in poverty just because they're not approved. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, landing right on the table where Michael had sat a week earlier. The system was still the same old one. But that morning, Sunrise Diner had restarted with the core thing it had once forgotten. Justice must be visible, and the right people must be called by name. There are times when someone stands up not to shout, but to end a silence that has lasted too long. No one in the restaurant had yet returned to their meal. A few middle-aged customers set down their knives and forks, as if recalling the times they'd left a tip, only to wonder if the reward had reached the right person. A young staff member tugged at their apron, perhaps for the first time, realizing justice isn't a promise on paper, but a light shining directly into the truth. Emily still stood there. No tears fell, but her eyes were red. Lois bowed her head, not protesting, and Brent turned away, face pale with embarrassment, unable to find a single word to excuse himself. Michael stepped up to the pause machine, gently touched the new words on the screen. Tip system reset, verified, name-based, live tracking. He said nothing more. But in that moment, his very silence spoke volumes. A right action does not need applause. A right system doesn't need a hall of fame, just the correct recognition of the right person at the right time. Then he looked around at the entire staff, from the older person brewing coffee to the young girl wiping tables in the far corner. I don't need your loyalty. I only hope that you are treated fairly. Some nodded, some held each other's hands. Emily set the water tray down, took a step toward Michael, and bowed her head, not to say thank you, but as if to reclaim her own self after so many days the system had made her doubt her worth. And when Michael stepped out of the restaurant, the glass door closed behind him. No one escorted him, no one cheered. But the whole restaurant paused for a few seconds to listen to something they had never felt before. Trust had just been restarted. Justice is not a spotlight. It's something that should shine even when no one is looking. A month later, that Sunrise Diner branch still hadn't changed its wall color, hadn't put up new slogans. But everyone who walked in could feel the difference, not with words, but with a sense. Right behind the counter, the electronic screen displayed a steady stream of notifications. PGSQL, copy edit, tip status live, vertical bar, verified vertical bar by service. Emily, table 2, 3, 0751, table 5, 2.25 Liam, 8, table 1, 420 Rita. No more Brent. No more names being prioritized by a list. Only the right person, the right reward at the right time. Emily, the girl who once had to hide a stale piece of bread in her backpack, now no longer walked among the tables. She was standing at branch number 53, opening a new staff training session. No PowerPoint slides, no performance reports. Just an old notebook placed gently on the table, the cover worn at the edges, with a line in red ink still intact. Total lost, 385. AFD, 3 weeks. I used to record every tip I didn't get, not to blame anyone, but to remind myself if I'd ever been forgotten, I needed to remind the system to remember. And she smiled, lightly, but enough to make the new employees nod as if they understood. The biggest lesson didn't lie in the procedures, but in something seemingly simple, fairness. Another morning, the weather was crisp and cool. Michael returned to the old branch. He still ordered the same pancake, still sat at the window seat. No one recognized him, and he didn't need them to. Before he left, he placed under the plate a neatly folded $20 bill, a handwritten note, the handwriting firm and steady. Thank you for standing tall. Even when doing the right thing left you without enough to live. Emily found the note after her shift. She didn't ask who left it. She just gently folded the note, slipped it into the old notebook, as if it were the final period for one chapter closed and another about to begin. There is a kind of justice that doesn't need to be spoken. It just needs, every morning, to never force anyone to choose between what's right and what's enough to live. A month later, Sunrise Diner, the branch that once drowned in mismatched invoices, now lit up every morning like a proper habit, not with flashy banners or showy summary meetings, but with a quiet consistency done right day after day. Behind the cash register, a bright blue screen refreshed every second. PGSQL, copy edit, tip status, verified, vertical bar, live tracking. Emily, table 2, 300, Emily. 0759, table 4-250, Carlos. 816, Table 1, 4 non-Naomi. Every line was a beat of trust, restored no signature approval needed, no more filtering software. Emily, the one who once had to quietly wrap half a stale slice of bread during the morning shift, now no longer wore an apron among the tables. She stood before a new staff class at branch number 53, not holding any lecture notes, just placing an old, worn notebook on the training desk. Fairness doesn't come naturally. We have to keep it alive, with what we once lost. She opened to the last page where the red ink line was still there. Total lost, 385.50, 3 weeks. No one interrupted. No one asked why she didn't file a complaint. Because the person standing in front of them didn't need to explain anymore. She was living proof of one principle. What's right, if left unseen, would leave no one daring to keep it. Another morning light rain. Michael Carter returned to the old branch this time without any disguise. He sat at the table near the window, ordered the same pancake, plus a black coffee. Before leaving, he left under the plate a neatly folded $20 bill, a handwritten note in a slightly slanted script. Thank you for standing tall. Even when doing the right thing left you without enough to live. Emily found it after her shift. She didn't open the notebook to record it anymore. She simply folded the note and placed it among the pages that once bore every lost tip line. Because from that day, she no longer needed to record to prove she had ever been there. Her name now always appeared on the screen. Kindness should never be a reward for someone who's approved. It has to be the default, the foundational value, if a system wants to last long without having to test trust every day. Because if a person doing the right thing still has to starve, then the problem isn't with the person, it's with the system that has stopped seeing what's right as what should be.